On December 13, 2018, the hacking group Anonymous dominated headlines with a shocking release. This time, the leak revolved around a set of emails reportedly obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request directed at the US State Department. These emails allegedly contained a bizarre and chilling request for information about the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the ancient Sumerian king and mythological figure, along with details regarding his body's location, and even more astonishingly, the burial sites of the Nephilim. The leaked information quickly captivated people worldwide, reigniting ancient myths and fueling speculation that the US government might have knowledge of long-lost artifacts that could alter human history. The notion that the US government could have hidden information about Gilgamesh has been too compelling for many to dismiss. Anonymous, known for its decentralized operations and hacktivist agenda, has historically been dedicated to exposing government and corporate secrets, often using leaks to uncover corruption or misconduct. However, the December 13, 2018 leak stood out even by Anonymous's own standards. It wasn't just a classified document dump involving political affairs or corporate wrongdoing. Instead, the content ventured into the realm of ancient mysteries and mythology, two subjects rarely associated with government transparency. The leaked email, allegedly part of a Freedom of Information Act request release, detailed a request from an unnamed individual or group seeking documents about a resurrection chamber allegedly tied to Gilgamesh. According to ancient Sumerian mythology, Gilgamesh was a demigod king whose epic tale is one of the oldest surviving pieces of literature. The email also referenced Gilgamesh's body and the Nephilim, who are often described in biblical texts as a race of giants or the offspring of angels and humans. These references sent the internet into a frenzy, especially among conspiracy theorists who have long speculated about the true nature of human history, hidden artifacts, and secret government programs. The idea that the US government could possess or be seeking information about such arcane topics only fueled their speculation further. For many, the leak seemed to validate their long-standing beliefs that governments and powerful organizations were privy to knowledge about ancient civilizations and extraterrestrial beings that they were deliberately withholding from the public. The reference to Gilgamesh in the leaked email immediately raised eyebrows. In Sumerian mythology, Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, a city-state in ancient Mesopotamia. His exploits are recounted in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a series of poetic stories that are among the earliest known works of literature, dating back to the 3rd millennium BCE. According to the legend, Gilgamesh was 2/3 god and 1/3 man, and his epic tale involves numerous feats of heroism, encounters with gods, and a quest for immortality. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city of Uruk was a major center of power in ancient Mesopotamia, and some historians argue that there may have been a king named Gilgamesh whose exploits were later mythologized. However, the notion of a resurrection chamber is something entirely different. There is no known reference in Sumerian or Babylonian mythology to such a chamber, nor is there any archaeological evidence that suggests one exists. Yet the idea is intriguing, particularly for those who believe that ancient civilizations may have possessed knowledge or technologies far beyond what is currently recognized by mainstream science. For researchers, the idea that the US government could be searching for or concealing information about Gilgamesh's resurrection chamber aligns with broader beliefs about hidden knowledge and ancient technologies that have been deliberately suppressed. The inclusion of the Nephilim in the leaked email only added to the intrigue. Oddly enough, German archaeologists believed they had discovered the burial site of the legendary ruler Gilgamesh, and after a lapse of 5 months, Iraq was subjected to an invasion. Undoubtedly, it is widely known that the United States of America set up a military outpost in the ancient Babylonian city, deliberately destroyed several historical artifacts, and also took a significant number of these findings with them. They erected structures and designated areas for helicopter landings within the historic city. It is widely known that they were actively seeking something of utmost significance. The Nephilim are mentioned in the Bible, most notably in the book of Genesis, where they are described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. They are often interpreted as giants or fallen angels, and their mysterious origins have been the subject of fascination for theologians, historians, and researchers alike. Many believe that the Nephilim represent a hybrid race, half divine, half human, that existed before the Great Flood. Some theories even suggest that the Nephilim were involved in the construction of ancient megalithic structures around the world, using advanced technology or knowledge that has since been lost. For those inclined to believe in these theories, the notion that the US government might possess information about the location of the Nephilim's burial sites was both shocking and, in a strange way, affirming. The question of why the US State Department would be involved in such a search is another layer of the mystery. Some have speculated that the email may have been part of a secret project or investigation into ancient artifacts and beings, while others suggest that it could be linked to ongoing efforts to uncover ancient technologies or knowledge that could have a profound impact on modern science and politics. The Freedom of Information Act request, if genuine, suggests that certain factions within the government may indeed be exploring topics that many of us are unaware of. The idea that the US government would be interested in Gilgamesh's resurrection chamber or the burial sites of the Nephilim implies a broader investigation into humanity's ancient past and the potential existence of lost knowledge or artifacts. For those who believe in the cover-up of ancient history, the leak seemed like confirmation that powerful institutions have been hiding information about humanity's origins, advanced ancient technologies, and potentially extraterrestrial influences for years. While skeptics dismiss such claims as baseless, the fact that the email was allegedly obtained from a Freedom of Information Act request lent a certain credibility to the notion that something unusual might be going on behind the scenes. In recent years, US officials have made significant efforts to return stolen antiquities that were looted from Iraq during times of conflict, particularly following the 2003 invasions and the subsequent chaos. Among the items returned were priceless artifacts, including cylinder seals and other objects dating back thousands of years, representing some of the earliest periods of human civilization. These repatriations highlight both the importance of preserving cultural heritage and the devastating impact that looting has had on Iraq's rich historical legacy. The return of these artifacts is not only a significant diplomatic gesture, but also a symbol of accountability and cooperation between nations. The efforts by US authorities to return these stolen items offer a glimmer of hope that more can be done to recover the countless other pieces of cultural history that were lost during periods of unrest. As artifacts like cylinder seals, clay tablets, and statues are returned, they help restore Iraq's historical narrative and bring some measure of justice for the destruction caused by war and looting. The looting of Iraq's antiquities became widespread during and after the 2003 US-led invasions of the country. As Iraq's political and social structures crumbled, its museums, archaeological sites, and cultural institutions were left vulnerable to theft and destruction. Thousands of priceless artifacts, many of which documented the earliest developments of human civilization in Mesopotamia, were stolen, destroyed, or sold on the black market. Mesopotamia, often referred to as the cradle of civilization, is home to some of the earliest known human societies, including the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. These cultures produced some of the world's first cities, legal codes, and forms of writing. Artifacts from this region, including clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions, cylinder seals, statues, and pottery, are invaluable to understanding the history of humanity. The theft of these antiquities wasn't just a loss for Iraq. It was a loss for the entire world. Many of the stolen artifacts ended up on the international black market, sold to private collectors, galleries, and museums. The sale of looted antiquities became a lucrative business, driven by the global demand for rare and ancient objects. The result was the scattering of Iraq's cultural treasures across the world, making recovery efforts challenging and complex. Recognizing the magnitude of the loss, US authorities have played a role in repatriating looted Iraqi antiquities. Working closely with Iraqi officials, US law enforcement agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, have tracked down stolen artifacts and worked to return them to their rightful place. These efforts have often involved collaborations with museums, auction houses, and private collectors who unknowingly or knowingly acquired looted items. One significant return occurred in 2021 when the US government repatriated more than 17,000 artifacts to Iraq, marking one of the largest returns of looted cultural property in history. Among the items returned were clay tablets, seals, and other objects that dated back to the Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian periods, many of which had been illegally smuggled out of Iraq. This event was hailed as a major step forward in the effort to recover Iraq's lost cultural heritage. Cylinder seals, some of the artifacts that were returned by the US government, hold special significance in Mesopotamian history. These small, carved stone cylinders were used to imprint images and inscriptions onto clay, often serving as a form of personal identification or a means of sealing documents and property. They were highly prized in ancient Mesopotamia and were often intricately carved with depictions of gods, myths, and daily life. The use of cylinder seals dates back to around 3500 BCE, and they are considered to be among the earliest examples of human art and communication. The return of these seals, along with other artifacts, not only helps restore Iraq's historical record, but also allows scholars and archaeologists to continue studying these ancient societies. Each object returned to Iraq contributes to a deeper understanding of the Mesopotamian world, from the development of early writing systems to the religious and cultural practices of the time. Artifacts like cylinder seals provide tangible links to the past, offering insights into the lives of individuals who lived thousands of years ago. The repatriation of looted antiquities has significant ethical and diplomatic implications. On one hand, the return of these items is a moral imperative. They were taken during times of turmoil, often illegally, and belonged to the people of Iraq, whose cultural heritage was plundered. Returning these artifacts helps to heal some of the wounds left by war and colonization, restoring dignity to a nation that has suffered immeasurable cultural losses. On the other hand, these repatriations also symbolize a growing recognition of the importance of cultural property laws and international cooperation in the fight against the illegal trade in antiquities. The US government's actions demonstrate a commitment to upholding these principles and ensuring that historical artifacts are preserved for future generations, rather than being sold on the black market or housed in private collections. Moreover, the return of these items fosters positive diplomatic relations between Iraq and the US. At a time when Iraq is still rebuilding its institutions and infrastructure, the restoration of its cultural heritage is a significant step in the process of national recovery and reconciliation. The return of artifacts strengthens cultural ties and demonstrates respect for Iraq's ancient history and its contribution to the world's shared human heritage. The ancient Sumerians, one of the earliest known civilizations, left behind a rich cultural and literary heritage that continues to intrigue historians, archaeologists, and scholars. Their contributions to humanity include the development of the first writing system, cuneiform, the construction of monumental ziggurats, and the establishment of the first known city-states. However, one of the most fascinating aspects of Sumerian culture is their explanation of the origins of humanity. According to their mythology, human beings were created by the gods specifically to serve them and tend to their needs. The Sumerians believed that their gods were responsible for the creation of the universe, the earth, and humanity. Their pantheon was made up of a complex hierarchy of deities, each of whom had control over different aspects of nature and human existence. At the head of the pantheon was Anu, the sky god, followed by Enlil, the god of air and storms, and Enki, later known as Ea in Babylonian mythology, the god of wisdom, water, and creation. The Sumerians viewed their gods as powerful but also capricious beings who had little regard for the individual human experience. According to the Sumerians, in the beginning, the universe was a chaotic, undifferentiated mass. The gods, using their divine powers, brought order to this chaos. They separated the heavens from the earth and formed the seas, mountains, and rivers. Once the natural world was in place, the gods turned their attention to the creation of life, first populating the world with plants and animals, and finally deciding to create human beings. The Sumerian creation story is deeply rooted in the idea that humans were created to serve the gods. This notion is most clearly laid out in the Atrahasis epic, a Babylonian text that is believed to have Sumerian origins. According to this account, the gods initially created a race of laborers known as the Igigi, who worked to maintain the world for the gods, performing tasks like digging irrigation ditches and farming the land. Over time, however, the Igigi grew weary of their toil, and rebelled against the gods, refusing to continue their labor. Faced with the prospect of having to tend to the earth themselves, the gods sought a solution. Enki, the god of wisdom and creation, proposed creating a new being, humans, who would take on the burdens of labor and serve the gods. Enki, along with the goddess Ninhursag, also known as Nintu or Mami, began the process of human creation. According to our history, Enki used clay from the earth, mixing it with the blood of a slain god to form the first humans. The use of divine blood in the creation of humans was significant, as it imbued humanity with a spiritual connection to the gods, while the clay represented their mortal and earthly nature. The newly created humans were tasked with serving the gods, taking on the responsibilities of farming, tending livestock, building temples, and performing rituals. In this way, the Sumerians believed that human beings existed solely to alleviate the gods of their burdens, and their primary purpose in life was to ensure that the deities were honored and appeased through constant labor and worship. In Sumerian cosmology, the gods were not distant or detached from the human experience. Rather, they played an active role in the daily lives of the people. The gods controlled the forces of nature, and natural phenomena such as floods, droughts, and storms were seen as direct manifestations of divine will. The Sumerians believed that the gods could reward or punish humanity based on their actions, and it was essential to maintain their favor through regular offerings, sacrifices, and prayers. Temples were central to Sumerian life, serving as the primary locations where humans could interact with the gods. These temples, often built in the form of towering ziggurats, were considered the earthly homes of the deities. Priests acted as intermediaries between the gods and the people, performing rituals and sacrifices on behalf of the community. Through these acts of devotion, the Sumerians believed they could secure the gods' favor and ensure the prosperity of their city-states. However, the gods were also unpredictable and at times indifferent to human suffering. This is most famously portrayed in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero Gilgamesh embarks on a quest for immortality, only to learn that eternal life is reserved for the gods alone. The Sumerians understood that their relationship with the gods was one of submission and servitude, and while the gods could grant protection and blessings, they were not bound by human morality. The Sumerian Great Flood, one of the most enduring myths of ancient Mesopotamia, offers a narrative of destruction, survival, and divine intervention. It is a central element in Sumerian mythology and has deeply influenced other ancient flood stories, particularly the later Babylonian and Hebrew traditions. The story of the Sumerian flood reflects humanity's precarious existence in a world governed by capricious gods and natural disasters, while also addressing universal themes of mortality, morality, and the possibility of rebirth after catastrophe. The Sumerians, who lived in the region of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, around 4500 BCE, were among the first to develop urban civilizations. Situated between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the region was fertile but prone to unpredictable flooding, which could both sustain and destroy entire communities. As a result, the Sumerians had a deep understanding of the power of nature and saw natural disasters as manifestations of divine will. This geographical and environmental context likely influenced the development of the flood myth, as the Sumerians sought to explain the destructive forces they could not control. The Sumerian myth of the flood is one of the earliest known versions of the deluge story, which was later adapted by other cultures, such as the Babylonians and the Hebrews. In Sumerian mythology, the gods, who ruled over every aspect of life, became frustrated with the human race, particularly with their noise, rebelliousness, and disobedience. To deal with the growing discontent among the gods, they decided to send a great flood to wipe out humanity. This theme of divine retribution through a flood is one that resonates throughout various ancient mythologies, most notably in the story of Noah's Ark in the Hebrew Bible and in the ancient Indian and Greek flood myths. The Atrahasis epic is one of the key texts that tells the Sumerian version of the flood myth. In this story, the gods, led by Enlil, the god of wind and storms, grow weary of the human population. Humanity, which had been created to serve the gods and ease their burdens by performing tasks such as farming and building, had multiplied rapidly and had become too noisy and troublesome. The gods, irritated by the constant clamor of human activity, decided to rid the world of this noise and disturbance by unleashing a devastating flood. Before the flood was sent, the gods employed other methods to reduce the human population. Enlil first sent plagues and famines, but these were insufficient in curbing humanity's numbers. In a final attempt to eradicate humanity, the gods chose a more extreme solution, a flood that would cover the earth and drown all living creatures. However, not all the gods were in agreement with this decision. Enki, the god of wisdom and creation, who had played a role in the creation of humanity, was sympathetic toward humans. Recognizing the injustice of wiping out the entire race, Enki decided to intervene. He secretly warned a righteous man named Atrahasis of the impending disaster. Enki instructed Atrahasis to build a large boat, similar to the ark in the later story of Noah, and to load it with his family and animals to preserve life during the flood. As instructed, Atrahasis built the boat and loaded it with all necessary provisions. When the flood came, it lasted for several days and nights, covering the land and drowning the rest of humanity. The gods, seeing the destruction they had wrought, began to regret their decision. In particular, the goddess Ninhursag, who had been involved in the creation of humans, mourned the loss of life and wept over the drowned bodies. The flood not only destroyed humanity, but also left the gods without the worship and offerings that they had once received from humans. After the floodwaters receded, Atrahasis and his family disembarked from the boat and offered sacrifices to the gods in gratitude for their survival. The smell of the offerings attracted the gods, and they gathered around, accepting the sacrifices and recognizing that humanity's survival was essential to their own well-being. Realizing that humans were necessary to maintain the world, the gods agreed to allow humanity to repopulate the earth, though they imposed certain restrictions to ensure that the population would not become as large or noisy as before. These restrictions included shortened human lifespans and limits on childbirth. The story of Atrahasis is significant not only as a myth of survival, but also as an expression of the relationship between humans and the divine in Sumerian belief. Humans were seen as both a burden and a necessity for the gods. The gods required human labor and worship, but they were also quick to punish when humanity's actions disturbed their divine order. The Sumerian flood myth is also echoed in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the most famous and widely studied texts of ancient Mesopotamian literature. In this epic, Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, embarks on a quest for immortality after the death of his friend Enkidu. During his journey, Gilgamesh meets Utnapishtim, the Sumerian equivalent of Atrahasis, who tells him the story of the Great Flood. Utnapishtim recounts how the gods had decided to destroy humanity through a flood, and how he had been warned by the god Enki to build a boat and preserve life. After surviving the flood, Utnapishtim and his wife were granted immortality by the gods as a reward for their righteousness and obedience. The flood narrative in the Epic of Gilgamesh mirrors many elements of the Atrahasis myth, including the divine warning, the construction of the boat, and the eventual regret of the gods. However, in the context of Gilgamesh's quest, the story of the flood serves as a reminder of the limitations of human life. While Utnapishtim was granted immortality, Gilgamesh realizes that death is an inevitable part of the human condition and that eternal life is reserved for the gods. In addition to its influence on later religious traditions, the Sumerian flood myth offers insight into how the Sumerians understood their relationship with the gods and the natural world. The flood represents both divine wrath and the possibility of renewal, reflecting the Sumerians' awareness of the fragile balance between life and death, creation and destruction. The Sumerian Great Flood narrative did not remain confined to the boundaries of ancient Mesopotamia. Its themes of divine retribution, survival and renewal resonated deeply with cultures far beyond the Fertile Crescent, inspiring numerous flood myths that appear in religious, historical and mythological texts across the globe. From the biblical story of Noah's Ark to the Hindu tale of Manu, and even to flood myths among indigenous cultures in the Americas, the basic elements of the Sumerian flood story, the wrath of gods, the destruction of humanity, and the survival of a chosen few, recur time and again. These shared motifs suggest a universal human fascination with the power of nature and the fragility of civilization, as well as the profound need to find meaning in disasters. Perhaps the most well-known adaptation of the Sumerian flood myth is the biblical story of Noah's Ark, found in the book of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible. The parallels between Noah's flood and the earlier Sumerian story are striking. Like Atrahasis in the Sumerian myth, Noah is chosen by God to survive a catastrophic flood that will wipe out humanity. In both stories, the protagonist is warned in advance and instructed to build a large boat, or ark, to save his family and pairs of animals from the impending disaster. The reason for the flood in both stories is similarly rooted in divine dissatisfaction with humanity. In the Bible, God decides to flood the earth because it has become corrupt, violent, and sinful. Just as the Sumerian gods could no longer tolerate the noise and rebellion of the human race, the biblical God is repelled by human wickedness. In both cases, the flood serves as a form of divine purification, with only the righteous few surviving to repopulate the earth. The biblical flood story also incorporates a covenant element, with God promising Noah that such a flood will never again be sent to destroy the earth. This promise, marked by the appearance of a rainbow, underscores the theme of renewal and hope that is also present in the Sumerian myth. In both versions, the survivors represent a fresh start for humanity, bound to new agreements with the gods that would hopefully prevent future calamities. The Epic of Gilgamesh played an essential role in connecting the Sumerian flood myth to the rest of the ancient Near Eastern world. The inclusion of the flood story in this epic helped spread the narrative beyond the boundaries of Sumer, influencing neighboring civilizations such as the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The story of Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh's ancestor and the Sumerian equivalent of Noah, ensured that the flood myth became one of the key elements of Mesopotamian lore. As the flood story passed through different hands and regions, it took on new characteristics and variations while retaining its core structure. The Epic of Gilgamesh was translated and adapted into several languages, including Akkadian, a language spoken widely throughout Mesopotamia. The Akkadian version of the flood story, along with its influence on Babylonian literature, played a critical role in transmitting the myth to other cultures, including the Hebrews during their exile in Babylon. Flood myths are not limited to the ancient Near East. They also appear prominently in other ancient civilizations. In Hindu mythology, the story of Manu shares many similarities with both the Sumerian and biblical flood narratives. According to the ancient Indian texts, Manu was the first human and progenitor of humanity. One day, he was warned by a fish, who was an incarnation of the god Vishnu, that a great flood would soon destroy all life on earth. Manu was instructed to build a boat and gather the seeds of all living things, which he did. When the flood came, Manu's boat, guided by the divine fish, safely survived the deluge, allowing Manu to repopulate the earth afterward. This Hindu flood myth, like the Sumerian and biblical versions, involves divine intervention, the salvation of a righteous figure, and the preservation of life through a great ark. The themes of renewal, divine favor, and humanity's dependence on the gods for survival are also central to the tale.